So here we are. We're in Siman Tzadi Aleph, and we're going to do the first four Seifim. That's my plan. If you take a look, if you take a look at the very beginning, let's start with the Shulchan Aruch actually. I actually am looking at the Yoreh HaShulchan at the moment. He says like this, or maybe Josh, you want to read the first? You want to read the first Seif?
I'll read later.
Oh, you're in your office. I'm sorry, I forgot. Okay, so maybe Deborah, you can read it.
In the Shulchan Aruch, Tzadik Aleph.
Tzadik Aleph, Basar v'Gvina.
Basar v'Gvina shenaku zev mutarim. Elash sarid l'Deah makom v'giatzon. Mutar l'tsurotzon the
Right. So, first of all, it says that basar v'gvina, you can that if they touched, it doesn't ruin them. They're still mutter. But you do have to Deah, which I think means wipe. You have to wipe off the place where they touched. Umutter. I'm not sure. Right. Deah kelim means what dishwasher. So it could mean rinse. Could mean to wipe though. Either way. Umutter litzor otam b'mitpat. What, you saw something that specified exactly what ladiach means? Deborah?
No,
You just think that's what it... Logically it means that, yeah, rinsing. Yeah, it could mean rinsing. Okay, umutter litzor otam b'mitpachat achat. So, where do we get this din that you're allowed to wrap them in one mitpachat? So,
from the Mishnah.
From the Mishnah. Where is the Mishnah?
Kuf Zayin Amud Bet.
Exactly, thank you. So let's look at Kuf Zayin Amud Bet. Just to remind ourselves, we saw it last week, but let's look at it again. It says, Sror Adam Basar, Kuf Zayin in Hullin Amud Bet. Sror Adam Basar v'Gvina b'matpachat achat, bilvad shelo yiyu nogi'in zeh b'zeh. As long as they don't touch each other. Fine. Now, so what exactly is this din? What does it mean you're wrapping them in one mitpachat? What does that mean? Okay. What's the case?
I always assumed that you were transporting them in some way.
Right, right. Okay. So what's the chid? What are they? They're not touching each other though, right?
They're not what?
They're not touching each other. I don't know. It always bothered me. What does it mean? Why are we telling you that you can put them together, but you can't they can't touch? Like, it's like if you would tell me you can put them in two separate Ziploc baggies, I wouldn't really need to hear that. I know that. It's obvious that if there's not touching. So, what does this mean that they are? There must be something different from them being completely wrapped separately. So what exactly is this case?
Maybe they had like a really large piece of material, so you could wrap it in such a way that they shouldn't be touching.
Right, and what's the fear? And
like a scarf.
And so why is it worse than two Ziploc baggies?
Maybe it's porous. Maybe it's not like a Ziploc bag, which isn't porous.
Maybe it's porous, yeah. All right, I think we got enough of the details, but I think that was what I was looking. I think it's porous. That, in other words, you're using the same piece of cloth, so it's similar to like a tablecloth. On the same tablecloth, I have basar and gvina. We saw you have to have a divider there. You're not really supposed to do that, but if you're maybe it'll unravel. But the point is, you're using that same piece of cloth and you're wrapping them up. First you wrap one, and then the other corner you wrap up the other, and maybe it'll unravel somehow. So we're not worried that it'll unravel. You did a good job. We're assuming you did a good job. And why are we not worried that it unravels? if it unravels, what's the worst case scenario if it did unravel? In other words, the worst case is that it unravels, they touch, and then you'll just wipe them, like we learned. So, in other words, we're not worried about you possibly cooking them together, right? If we'd be worried that they might come to fall into the pot together, then we wouldn't allow you to wrap it. In other words, the wrapping is not a perfect solution, but even if it doesn't work, we'll only come to a situation where now we have a solution, which is to wipe them or to wash them. I think that's the point. And the commentaries get into this question of like, are you allowed to do something where the result is b'di'evid mutter? In other words, are you allowed to do something that, I said that wrong. Are you allowed to do something that if it goes wrong, you'll have a case which is mutter b'di'evid? You're not allowed to do something where if it goes wrong, you'll have a deraita problem. But what about doing something that could lead to only something that's asur lahatchila, but in the end you could wipe it off? I think one of them said.
I think the Torah's language was more confusing than the Shulchan Aruch's language. There it was more confusing as what is lahatchila and what's di'evid.
Yeah, what was confusing to you? Where in the tour? Let's look. If you say look at the tour, what's the tour you're? What was confusing to you, Deborah?
Well, I just had to ask myself questions, like when it said Basar Kavinish Nagus Epised Mutarin a Lodge Sri with Deah. It's like, does it mean it's Mutar Lahakila? Does it mean it's Mutar B'di'evid? I just asked myself.
Yeah, he means they're mutter now. You just have to wipe them off. But they're mutter. But and he's also saying you're allowed to put them together near each other. All right, that's lichatchila. You're allowed to put them in a situation which could lead to something, but that something will have a solution for it. That's kind of the point. Okay, let's read the next halacha. Actually, Josh, you're in a place now where you can read? Yes? Okay, so Josh, read halacha bet. I think I got lost. Halacha bet in the Sadi Aleph. Kol midi de boy hadacha.
Kol midi de boy hadacha.
Exactly.
Kigon lahaniach basar heter sonain the ka'ara shel iser sonain. Okay. So anything that needs some type of surface cleaning, such as placing a piece of mutter meat in a cold treif pot.
Well, actually, right.
Such because we're worried that maybe you'll eat it and not wipe it off because they're like, oh, it's cold. Like,
so wait. What's the havamina here? What do you do? What's the havamina? Why would you be allowed to do this?
Why would you be allowed to do what?
It says anything that what is the havamina of this that boy hadacha? In other words, it could have just said anything. You're allowed somebody's. Josh, mute your microphone. You're muted? Okay, thank you. Yeah, there's something wrong with your microphone there. Maybe your phone is near the speaker, the microphone. Anyway, my question is like this. It says, Kol midi de boy hadacha kegon lahaniach basar heter tzonen bekara shel iser tzonen asur la'atchila. Well, why don't you just say anything is asur to put anything, any kosher meat on any asur meat, and any asur place? Why is he giving this havamina that if it boils hadacha, you might think you could do it? But he's saying no, and then he ends up saying no, but don't have that havamina.
Because there would be cases of kosher things that I guess you could put in non-kosher pots. And since
No, but
when
I'm interested in particularly what's hadacha have to do with anything? In other words, what does having to do hadacha possibly make it better?
It's very it cleans just the very surface.
He's saying like this. You might say to yourself like this. If I put this, if I have this piece of meat. Let's say I have a piece of salami. I have a piece of salami. I want to put it on this treif piece of pork, and I want it, or let's say the worst case, a piece of salami on my piece of pork. Why not do it? And the person says, "Well, it's usher. These things might touch." He says, "So I'll wipe. So I'll do hadacha afterward. I'll do hadacha afterward, and I'll solve the problem." Now, that's what I'm saying. In other words, you might think that because you have a solution, you can go ahead and put it there. And we just learned that there is a case where if you wrapped it together, it might touch, then you can do hadacha. And it's mutter to wrap it, because you didn't actually put them together. But here it's telling you, you can't say, well, since I have that solution, let me lechatchila go and put the salami on the pork, and I'll just wipe it when I want to eat it. What's the reason you can't do that? Shema, he writes, doesn't he write? Dilma achil below hadacha. Maybe you'll forget. Dilma achil below hadacha. Maybe you'll eat it without wiping it. So in other words, if we let you put your salami on the pork, you may come and eat the salami forgetting to wipe it. But of course, we've learned an implication here that something that doesn't need hadacha, you could touch them together. Like, well, what doesn't need hadacha we don't know, but we'll get to that. We can think, we can already start thinking of what wouldn't need hadacha. Let's say, putting a cracker on a clean plate, a treif plate. It doesn't require hadacha. So then I could do it. Because nothing
What are you concerned about fish in a fish store?
Oh, we're about to learn about a fish, right, herring. Well, that's not a cracker. So he says, let's read on. V'davka mivushal dilav orche bahadacha. But we're only worried about this forgetfulness of yours if it's something that's cooked that you wouldn't normally dilav orche. It's not its way bahadacha. You don't normally wash a piece of cooked, brisket. You don't wash your brisket. Avamidi de orche bahadacha kagon basar chai v'kiyotze bo shari lechatchila. But something that you always wash before you cook it, you could lechatchila put it on that piece of pork. So we're talking about, basically it sounds like what we're saying here is, the way I'm explaining it, a piece of beef, raw beef, you could place on top of a piece of raw pork. Because anyway, before you cook that beef, you're going to rinse it off. So we're not worried that you're going to forget. You're for sure going to rinse it off. Yeah? That's a little bit of a crazy din. But I think that's what he's saying. Comments?
That worked for fish.
So, right. So they talk, if you look in footnote, if you look in R.A.Eiger HaShulchan Bet, in the Taz, he talks about herring. Also, the Aruch HaShulchan talks about herring. And they say that the herring you shouldn't put on the plate, on your plate. And let's say you go to a Gentile, you're traveling Europe, you're traveling Eastern Europe in the 1880s, and you want to eat something kosher. So you say, I'll have a herring. And he brings out the herring, cold herring, on a plate. He says, you shouldn't do this. He says, well, let's read it. Let's read it in the R.A.Eiger HaShulchan. Here, Isaac, you have the R.A.Eiger HaShulchan?
Sure, give me the footnotes down below?
No, actually, I mean bet in the Taz. Sorry.
Yeah, in the Merchant, Yishkach v'yochad b'lo adacha. That one?
No, well, I don't think so. Well, maybe. I don't know. My Shmerechet is a little bit different from everybody's. Taz number 2.
Asur lechatchila?
Oh, you mean in the Tav?
In the regular Taz. Taz bet.
Oh, okay.
I said footnote, it was a mistake.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's it. אסור לכתחילה, כתב בשל, אסור להניח לכתחילה הרין, דגים מלוחים בכלי של גוי. ומאחר וצריך להדיח את הדג מלוח לאחר שניחו בכלי של גוי, יש לחוש שם ישכח ויאכל בלא הדחה.
Exactly. Since wait just a second. Just following our halacha. Since you would need to wash it, and you don't normally wash your fish before you eat your herring, but you do need to in halachically. Therefore, you can't put it on the plate.
I mean, also it's worth, even though he hasn't mentioned, it's probably worth mentioning that the herring is probably by definition lach.
Oh, for sure. Because I think we're about to talk about dry. Yeah, the Ramah. Exactly. The herring is lach. The Ramah is going to start talking about a cracker on a plate. But let's say the fish is wet, so it's going to transfer to the plate. Okay, go ahead.
יש לחוש שם ישכח ויאכל בלא הדחה. לכל שכן, שאסור לתת לכתחילה וגרקש, מלפפונים חמוצים,
Ugurkus. Does that sound like anybody? You know what that means?
Sounds like something familiar.
That sounds like something familiar. Gherkins. Ugurkus. That's gherkins.
ימי מלח וקערת גוי, למאכל שצריך לדיחה, מאכל שמחו בקערה של גוי, חשב שם ישכח ויאכל בלא הדחה.
Right. So he says the same thing with pickles.
Right.
Okay, continue.
והמי מלח, זה לא שייך למדחה, אסורים. There's no way you could do a dacha to the salt water. וכתב התורת חטאת בכלל י"ז דין ד' לשעת הדחק, כלומר שיתאחסן בבית גוי, כדיעבד דמי ומותר. דחוק בני אוסרים, רק לכתחילה כמו שכתב המחבר.
Oh, so look at that. So he tells you everything is aser, and then he throws in this big kula. He says, wait a second. If you're in my case that I said, you're in a restaurant, you're traveling in Eastern Europe in 1880, and you're in a beit goy. What are you doing in a beit goy? Nitachsen bebeit akum. In other words, you're in a non-Jewish hotel. That's b'di'evid. That's called b'di'evid. And now you could put your pickle on the plate. Of course, you still need to rinse the pickle before you eat it.
But wouldn't the dacha here, just on a side note to what we said earlier, make more sense as wiping than as rinsing?
Why?
I don't know, are they videoing you actually like rinsing off your pickle and rinsing off your herring?
You're saying, how are you going to do that at the plate? How are you going to? You're sitting at the table in the restaurant. You don't have a sink.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seemed to me that something made more sense as wiping.
Yeah, I think it might be wiping. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure, but I think we saw last time. What did we see last time about hadacha? And we saw two things you need to do between milk and meat. Hadacha v'kinuach. Okay, there we go. We saw hadacha v'kinuach. And there we said that hadacha is rinsing and kinuach is wiping. So it might mean rinse. So I think maybe even though Isaac, you're on my side, I may switch to Devorah's side. It may be rinsing. So in any case, we see that this pickle you need to. You're allowed to have it on a plate at the Gentile's house, but you need to rinse it off or wipe it off. Now, is anyone bothered by this halacha? I mean, doesn't it seem a bit too far to go? I mean, he brings you out a clean plate, and he brings you out a pickle, and I have to rinse it off? I mean, the pickle's kosher, and the plate is, it came out of the kitchen, it's probably clean. Why do I have to do this? So it bothered me. So when something bothers me, I look in the Aruch HaShulchan. In other words, it doesn't make sense. I want to make sense of it. So I looked. You don't have this in front of you, but I'll just read to you. He says, I'll just read you one sentence in the Aruch HaShulchan. This is in our Siman, whatever, I don't know what you call it, Siman Bet. In other words, Siman Tzadi Aleph, and then he calls Aleph Bet, Halacha Bet. At the end of it, he says, V'yesh lezeh trufa kala. There is a simple trufa, simple medicine. It means a simple solution. Lirchotz hetev hateller. Just, the teller is Yiddish for plate. Just wash the plate well. B'mayim niki'im. Vaz mutar la'aniach aleha ma'achal tzonen or mashke tzonen. Then you can put on it the food. So he just throws everything. He torefet the klafim. He just changes the game. And now he's saying, when we were talking about a plate, we just read, it was actually a dirty plate. It wasn't a modern plate where they have a madiach kelim and it comes out, shiny, squeaky clean. And then you put a pickle on it. You have to rinse it. No, that case for sure is okay, says the Aruch HaShulchan. It's only talking about some dirty plate from some, greasy spoon.
So would this be parallel to the question of eating like sushi in a non-kosher restaurant? It's cold, it's on a cold, clean plate.
Yeah, I think.
Or the mechatchila, you can't do it anyways.
Well, we saw that the problem. He just gave us a trufa. We just got a trufa from the Aruch HaShulchan, which sounds like he's saying that this din only applies if there's some real worry that food particles are transferring. Now, sushi, there are other problems with sushi, which is that they have a wooden board where they cut the fish, and if some of the fish are not kosher, and then they put onto the board the other fish, you could say it's batel, but I wouldn't say that that's not a chashash there. As if we're worried about little particles of food getting stuck on your fish on your plate, well, what about in the serving room? There's also, sushi is a problem, I would say. I mean, again, if it's a shas hadachak, and that's the only food you have. But they're talking about herring and things that are like you pull a herring out of a basket of herring and you just give it to. So I don't want to say that it extends to herring, to sushi exactly. Unless it's some kind of industrial sushi that they do all the tuna, and then they do all the salmon, and then they do the whatever non-kosher fish they have. Maybe they don't have non-kosher fish. I don't know.
Does it make a difference if it's like a plastic cutting board?
If it's what? Does it make a difference? Wait, I didn't hear you, Josh. It doesn't make a difference if
it's a plastic cutting board.
What it makes a difference is if the cutting board has been cleaned. That's what makes a difference. It doesn't, in other words, some people, I've heard people say that sushi chefs are very careful and they change their knives. I wouldn't make a rule. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, standard practice is that everything gets cleaned off and wiped off after everything is made.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that every restaurant follows that. I mean, in other words, if you know about a certain place and you've seen the way they work, maybe. But the point is, we're not worried about imaginary particles, which is what it sounded like at first. The Aruch HaShulchan is saying we're worried about real particles. And if it's really clean, we're not worried. And that's what I like. Okay. So let's... Yeah, question.
I don't know where the principle is, but I understood the principle was Tam Kelim Shogoyim are not considered in Yom Trade.
That's true. Yes, we'll see. I think it's in Siman Saadi Kuf Kaf. I think there 120. But that's true. But that's talking about transfer of flavor with heat. That's saying what's absorbed into the. We have a rule that says after 24 hours, what's absorbed into the kli is noten tam gam, is not treif. That says nothing about particles on the plate. That says what's absorbed in the plate. That says, right? And that's talking about heating, cooking. So it's really talking about like a pot, a rice pot. The rice pot in the sushi restaurant where he cooked that white rice. So the pot, we can assume he hasn't used it for something other than rice, kind of. In other words, we've assumed that it's Eino Ben Yomo, the pot, whenever he started using it. So the rice in the sushi might be okay. I would say they probably do have a rice pot. But in any case, let's continue. So now, so we've got this idea that things that you need to wipe, you're not allowed to put on something that will afterwards require you to wipe it because you might forget. And then we said, but things that you always wash anyway, like raw meat, then you could put them on something that might transfer a particle because you're going to wash it anyway. And we can rely on that standard practice. But we still are worried what exactly is things that need hadacha and things that don't need hadacha. And I said, a cracker. Let's see what the Ramah says. Here, Isaac, you want to read the Ramah?
Sure. Let's just get back. Right. ודווקא דבר שיש בו לחלוכית קצת, אבל דבר יבש ממש, אם לא בלע כלי רק בצונן, מותר להניח בו דבר יבש בלא הדחה כלל, ואין נקמן סימן קכ"ב.
Right. So he says what we sort of deduced, that this is talking about that it has some kind of moisture in it. But things that are mamash dry, it's okay. Now there's a problem with the language here in the Ramah. Does anyone see what this problem is? Like,
Is it the im lo?
yeah. Im lo bala, he says, im lo bala hakli rak betzonen mutter. If it's dry and cold, what do we care how the kli got absorbed in it some food, whether it was cold or hot? Like, why do we care about this? Why is he throwing this in? Makes no sense. So, if you look, where is it? Well, I'll just tell you outside. Actually, I saw it in two places, in the Shac, but also in the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan says this is not the. He quotes somebody else actually as saying this is not. This is a ta'ut here. What he means to say. Let's see if I can find it exactly. Here's what he should say. So look in the words, and I'll read it to you. Look in the words of the Ramah, where it says aval davar yavesh mamash. So it should say like this: aval davar yavesh mamash, or im lo bala hakli rak betzonen mutter gam davar lach. Klomar laniach davar yavesh mamash mutar af bala hakli bechamin. So in other words, he's saying like this. He's saying two different dinim. The Ramah is kind of some words got lost. But what he's saying is, if it's dry, then any kli will be fine. Because it's dry, and a kli doesn't transfer if it's dry. And the second thing he says, even if it's wet, it's okay, if the kli was never used, only absorbed, never absorbed anything hot. Lo bala kli rak betzonen. So he's saying you could even put, so according to this tikkun, you could even put like a wet food on a plate that it was like always used as a plate. It never got hot things on it. It was not an oven plate. So it's just two different dins. I would stick with the basic rule that we saw in the Aruch HaShulchan, that if it's clean, it's not a problem. All right, that's Aleph and Bet. Gimel. We're going to sort of flying through this here because there's not really that much to say about it. Here, Rachel, I see you're here, just in time. Are you available? Oh, I don't hear you.
Sorry, I'm late. I was caught in another meeting. Are we on the Torah or the Shulchan Aruch?
We're in the Merechet HaShulchan. Or the Shulchan Aruch.
I will listen.
You'll listen. Okay, so Isaac, read another halacha.
אוקיי, גמר. צריך להיזהר שלא ייגע בשר בלחם, שאם ייגע בו, אסור לאכלו עם גבינה. וכן ייזהר שלא ייגע בו גבינה, שאם ייגע בו, אסור לאכלו עם בשר.
Here, let me. So Isaac, you read that great. but just for the video, I want to read it again. Tzarich lezaher shelo yiga basar belechem, she'im yiga bo asur lo'ochlo im gvina. You have to be careful not to let meat touch your bread, because if it does touch your bread, you can't eat it with cheese. By the way, you notice we're only worried about the actual event happening. We're not worried, you don't have it on the table because later you might want to eat it and maybe you don't know what happened. We're saying don't. You have to be careful. Don't let the meat touch the bread. In other words, we're trusting you to be careful, but you should be careful. Because it has now meat on it. Don't let the bread touch cheese. Because if it has cheese on it, you can't eat it with meat. So at first it sounds like a chumrah, like you have to have separate bread, you can't have it. But I'm saying no, it's just saying only if it's actually touched do you have a problem. And if you look at Dalet in the Shac, I'm in the R.A.Eiger HaShulchan, but look at Dalet in the Shac, or Dalet in the Shac. Here, Isaac, read that.
I'll read it fully. שימי גבו אסור לאכלו עם גבינה, כלומר בלא הדחה בלחם אסור לאכלו עם גבינה, ולכן צריך להיזהר שלא ייגע בשר בלחם. דחשינן שם ישכח ויאכל הלחם בלא הדחה. וכל זה מהירי דווקא כשאחד מלח, כמו שכתוב בסוף.
Right. So but he just threw in a new law there. What was the new law? He threw in Asur lo'ochlo im gvina. Wait, at the beginning. Klomar below hadacha belechem. In other words, what's asur is to eat it without rinsing it. I don't know. Without rinsing it.
Now it has to be wiping.
Now it sounds like it has to be wiping. Without wiping it off. In other words, he's saying this whole din of the bread touching the cheese as being asur to eat with the meat is only if you didn't wipe it off. If you took a towel and cleaned off the cheese off the bread or the meat off the bread, then it's fine. Now there are people that there's the mafarshim that start having a diyun. What about if it touches the crust of the bread versus the middle of the bread? And they say, well, we're only talking about the crust of the bread. If it touches the middle of the bread, so it absorbs, you can't wipe it off. But if it's got, if it's a crusted bread, so that you can even flake off a piece of the crust. So that's what he says. So basically, we're talking about there are solutions also for the bread. In other words, you can remove. So again, we're worried about actual particles.
Who says that about the crust?
I don't remember. Sorry, I saw it, but I don't remember.
It seems like it's intuitively in touch with the rule of the Shulchan Aruch, because it seems like it's the sponge-like nature of the bread that's the concern, that it's going to absorb something. Or it's got like all these little crevices in it and the like.
Right. The bread is like, it's a sphog. It's a sponge, so right, I agree with you. But the crust is like hard, things can just fall off it. Hadacha, wipe it off.
We're talking about a loaf of bread. Why isn't Kedei Netina, you slice that end of bread off and put it over Israel?
Yeah. Yes, also, for sure, you could cut off the piece that touched. Yeah, there are solutions. Okay, now we're in Halacha Daled, and we're going to stay in Halacha Daled for the rest of the time. But before we do Halacha Daled, let's see the background for Halacha Daled. We could read it and then see the background, but I think it's better to see the background. So let's look at the background. So there you need to look in your Gemara Pesachim. That's what I sent to you as a source. And the Gemara that I mentioned to you to start there's actually a few words on Ayin Zion, on Ayin Hey Amud Bet. Just the very last line of Hey Amud Bet. Is that everyone's there?
Yes.
The last line of Hey Amud Bet is the beginning of the Gemara. There's a Mishnah at the bottom of Pesachim Ayin Hey Amud Bet, and then there's a Gemara. The Mishnah doesn't really concern us, I don't think. It's talking about a Korban Pesach and about touching. It's talking. You see, the problem with there's a whole sugya there about Korban Pesach and it touching. It has to be roasted. What if it touches if some juice gets on it, then it's like boiled at that spot, and then you have to cut that spot off because it was boiled and it wasn't roasted. So there's a whole discussion about that. But in that discussion is going to be irrelevant to us. So there, that was my filler. Everybody's there.
Yes.
Isaac.
Is it makom
I'm trying to find Safari.
The Mishnah starts Naga b'cherso shel tanor.
Yeah, I got the Mishnah.
Yiklof. So go to the first Gemara right after the Mishnah.
Oh, okay.
You see that, Yoni?
Sorry, which page?
I'm not sure. So what I have is on 75b, makom shenaf bulas malacha arbe pesachim ad chatzot osim makom shenaf lo lasmin ein osim. הולך ממקום שעושים למקום שאין עושים, אין ממקום שאין עושים למקום שעושים, etc.
No, I don't think you're in the right place. You're not in the right.
The last line for an
Ayin Hey is 75,
It's the last line of the page.
and it's the last line of the page. If you have a
What
reg,
I have.
you sure it's Pesachim? Chapter 7?
I mean, that's what the program tells me.
I just,
I'll send it to you on the chat. I'll send it to you on the chat window.
it's already there.
It's good to remember more.
All right, so here, Rachel, you want to read?
Sure.
Itmar.
Divrei hakol asor. Hang on, I'm online, so I have to turn the page. Divrei hakol asor. Tzonen l'toch tzonen, divrei hakol mutar. Cham l'toch tzonen, v'tzonen l'toch cham. Rav amar ila agavar, u'shmuel amar tata agavar.
All right, stop there. So we have this Amoritic statement, or Cham l'toch cham, divrei hakol asur. According to everybody, if hot substance mixes with other hot substance, or falls onto a hot thing, it's asur. Tzonen l'toch tzonen, and cold that falls onto cold, divrei hakol mutar. In other words, the mutar one is still mutar, the asur one is still asur. But what about cham l'toch tzonen? So what's the case? Cham l'toch tzonen. Let's say, hot piece of meat falls onto a cold piece of cheese, for example, or isser. It could be isser. Hot piece of beef falls onto a cold piece of pork. V'tzonen l'toch cham, cold into hot. So Rav amar ila gavar, Shmuel amar tata gavar. So this is an important machloket. Rav says that the top one is Gavar. Gavar means what here?
Takes precedence.
Better. Give me better than that.
I'd say maybe it spells rather than absorbs.
Controls over, rules over.
Or is the one that dictates the
Yes.
halacha?
Is the one like Rachel, I would say what Rachel and Deborah said, it's the one that dictates the halacha. In other words, the Tata Gavar, it is the one that determines what this is. If you have this, is this a cold event or is this a hot event? So Rav says, Ila Gavar, the top one determines what this event is. If the top one is cold, then this is a cold event. And it's mutter. And Shmuel says the Tata Gavar, the lower one, determines what this event was, and therefore, if the lower one is cold, then it's all mutter. And the reverse, if the lower one would be hot, then it would all be aser. It would all be hot, and then it would be aser. So that's their basic machloket. There's a Rashi here. Maybe this is a Rashi right here. Vishmul Amar. If you look at the second Rashi, it says Ila Gavar, he explains, Ha'elyon notseach, and that's minatseach, the top one wins. Okay, but the second Rashi, the third Rashi actually, V'Shmuel Amar Tata Gavar. Rachel, you want to read it?
Sure. Hilkach cham letoch tzonen mutar v'tzonen letoch cham asur. Ve'af al gav dehilchata karav be'isurei ve'ha hilchata kishmuel. Deha tanya tarte matnitin kapate k'dilachama.
All right, so explain that last part there.
So first he spells out what you just spelled out, and then says even though the law usually goes according to Rav in matters of whether food is permitted or not, in this particular law it goes according to Shmuel because it's taught in two other Mishnayot like him, as we'll explore later.
Oh, exactly. So he's basically saying there's a rule in Isser, not just in Isser Basar B'Chalav, in all Isserim. In maybe Nida, I don't need, well, there's any Isser. Any prohibition, we go like Rav, but here we go like Shmuel. Which means what? Shmuel said Tata Gavar. So that's the halacha. The halacha is Tata Gavar. And what's the reason? Just like you said. Because there are two bright... Tanya Tarti. There's two brightas that go like him. So we're going to skip a little bit of the Gemara. The Gemara goes through 3 proofs against Shmuel. That is, we're trying to prove the halacha like Rav. We bring 3 proofs against Shmuel, but all of them Shmuel solves. We solve them for Shmuel. So therefore there really is no attack on Shmuel. And then the Gemara picks up the first wide line, Tanya. The last word on the line is Tanya Kavte. The first word is Nistar. Nitaser. Nitaser. But we're at the Tanya Kavte de Shmuel. That's what you should look for if you're looking on your computer. Tanya Kavte de Shmuel. It's the first wide line. Want to read it, Rachel?
Tanya Kavte de Shmuel, cham letocham asur. V'chein tzonen shenatan letoch cham asur. Cham letoch tzonen, v'tzonen letoch tzonen madiach.
So wait, stop. Explain. So what? Cham letocham asur. Fine, that makes sense, right? Ken sonen shenatan letoch cham asur. Well, if it's the toch cham, that means the cham is the bottom. So that means tata gavar. If it's asur. Cham letoch tzonen. What about cham letoch tzonen? The bottom one is cold. V'tzonen letoch tzonen madiach. It's not asur. You just have to wipe it off, or rinse it off. I wonder if we have an explanation of what madiach here means. Madiach probably means rinse it off. Okay. And now read the Gemara's question on this.
Cham letoch tzonen madiach. Kevan decham hu adami karle. Afshar dela bala puerta klipa.
Klipa miha.
Klipa miha nibae.
Right.
Ela ema.
So wait. So what's the question? So what's the question and the answer?
The issue that the Gemara has is that all it needs is hadacha, and shouldn't it need klipa?
Exactly. Why? Because of what? What principle?
Because something must have absorbed a little bit, even in the.
So you should memorize this expression. Ademekarle iefshar de lo bala purta. That's the klal. Ademekar, until it gets cold, it's impossible that it didn't absorb at least something. So in other words, it's true that the bottom one is cold, but the top one, and the top one got cold from the bottom one because the bottom one is the determining factor. But it didn't get cold right away. Ad the Mekar, it started to absorb something from the cold one. Okay. So I always have a question about this. So which, are they both Asr? Or is just one of them Asr according to this?
What's the question?
In other words, the bottom one is cold. Let's say the bottom one is cold and treif. Oh, so the top one is hot and kosher. Ad mikare, until it got cold, it absorbed. Before it got cold, it was hot and it absorbed something from the treif one. So therefore, you have to take klipa from the top one, wherever it touched. What if the bottom one was? What if the cold one was the kosher one? What if the bottom one was kosher and the top one was treif? Would we also say that the cold kosher one absorbed from the hot one above because of this principle ad mikari le efshar de lo balapurta?
It's hard to justify from the language, but I feel experientially that right when something hot touches something cold, the cold thing where it touches becomes a little warm.
Right. So in other words,
So I feel like you have to take that into account.
okay, so Rachel, I think I agree with you 100%. I think you said it all. In other words, there's two things. From the language, it doesn't sound like that would be usher. But because the language says ademikare, and the bottom one is the kosher one. It's not getting colder from the hot one above. It really should have say there's a reverse case. Adekare le'efshar de lo polet purta. In other words, until it got cold, it didn't polet purta, not just bala purta. So you could say the Gemara just said one side, but assumed the other side. And I think that's what we're going to have to say. And that's the way the halachic poskim, that's what the halachic deciders they understand it. In other words, it goes also that way. In other words, it's not just ad mikari le'efshar de lo bala purta, it's also the lo palat purta. It also could conceivably, the hot one could push into the cold one beneath it and usher it. A klipa. Is that clear? Wait, Atari, you want to say something?
What is purta?
Purta. A little bit. Purta is a little bit.
Iota.
Yeah, something. So the Gemara says, klipa miha nivoy. We have to have a klipa. And then the Gemara goes on. And it rewrites the Mishnah. It rewrites the Breita. So read Rachel. Period. So you have to kolef. You have to remove a klipa, or you have to cut off. You have to peel off some layer of the tzonen letoch, of what is it, cham letoch tzonen, because one of them was cham. Only in the case of tzonen letoch tzonen, when it's two cold things, then you can just rinse it. And now the Gemara brings another breita. This is what Rashi said. Rashi said there are two breitas. And here the Gemara brings a second breita to say the same thing. The first case, though, it didn't mention what the Isser was, did it? It just said, cham latoch cham, asur. Is it pork? Is it avodah zarah? Is it yayin nesech? We don't know what it is, but it's asur. Now we have a new brisa. What? Isaac?
Nothing, not important.
Okay. So, Brisa, Rachel.
Tanya idach, basar roteach, shenafal letoch chalav roteach, v'chein tzonein shenafal letoch cham, asur. Cham letoch tzonein, v'tzonein letoch tzonein, mediach. Cham letoch tzonein mediach, kevan decham hu, ad mekarle, efshar delam bala purta, klipa mihani bahe. So it's the same issue.
Ela ema.
Except it's sponsored by,
Except what?
Except
sponsored by, this one's sponsored by Halav, and the earlier one seemed like it was more other Itorim, Shari Itorim.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the other one was unclear. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. The other one maybe was Shar Isurim, and this one is Basar B'chalav. Ela ema cham letoch tzonen kolef, tzonen letoch tzonen mediach. And then it says, Amarmar, tzonen letoch tzonen mediach. I don't know exactly what that statement is doing there, but Mar just said, tzonen letoch tzonen mediach. Fine. We already knew that. So we have these two brises. That's the proof that Shmuel is right. And even in Basar B'chalav, we say this. Okay, now you should look at this Tosfot, the last Tosfot on the page, short one. Here, I can read it. He says like this: Tanya idach basar roteach, v'tema. Tema hatu lamali lahavia. Why do I need to bring two brises? Isn't one enough? Why do I need to bring two? One would have been enough. V'omer Rabbeinu Tam. The kamash malan, the afilu chalav shari, that even the milk is permitted. Da'afal gav dacham latoch tzonen boy klipa, b'davar sheyachol la'asot klipa, b'davar delo shayach klipa kamo b'chalav, mutter, midelo katani yisura, gabe chalav, kedekatani klipa gabe basar. Can someone explain that to me? What is he saying? He's saying they taught it twice. What's special about the chalav case? In other words, why did it need to bring me the chalav case?
Because you can't take a clip out of chalav.
Because you cannot take a clip out of chalav, and therefore, what's the din of the chalav? In other words, what's the case? You have cold milk. You have cold milk, and falls into it hot meat. So you take the meat out right away. You take klipa off of the whole outside of the meat. What about the cold milk? You have to take a klipa off of it too. But how could you do it? If it's frozen milk, you might be able to, but if it's just milk, you couldn't. So, so how can you take a klipa off it?
Are we assuming it only goes one way?
What goes one way? The klipa?
For instance, the meat absorbs a little bit of the klipa of the milk, but the milk absorbs nothing of the meat.
No. We discussed this. You remember we discussed this. That's what I made this. I made this point that even though the language sounds like bala purta, it's also polet purta. In other words, the milk. No, it goes both ways. The meat absorbed milk, and the milk absorbed meat.
Okay.
So we have a klipa in the milk. So what does Rabbeinu Tam say? He says it says kolef. It didn't say anything else. It didn't talk about a case where you can't kolef. Therefore, it must be what? What din does he want to create? There's a klipa in this milk. The milk should be aser, right? Says Rabbeinu Tam, no. It's mutter. Because when it says take a klipa off, it says b'davar delo shayich klipa kumo b'chalav mutter. Something that's, you can't take a klipa off, so you don't have to. It's like, I don't know, you tell your child to practice the violin, and he didn't do it, and now it's his bedtime. Nebuch, he has to go to bed. You're supposed to have did it, but you can't do it now, because it's time to go to bed. So you can't do it with this milk, so you don't do it. Must not be that important. Right? According to Rabbeinu Tam, that klipa must not be that important. If you can't do it, just don't.
Except it becomes a big machloket.
Well, we're going to get into this machloket. So read the next. So the next line of the Tosfot says, "V'riva cholek bezeh umatzrik shishim kedei klipa." And the Riva says, "No, mapitom, I disagree. The milk is aser unless you have 60 against the klipa." In other words, what's the klipa? Like, you will sort of imagine how much klipa could there be in the milk from that piece of meat that fell in. Let's say you take that piece of meat. I'm trying to imagine. Take that piece of meat, and you say, well, the circumference of it is, 3 square inches. So 3 square inches of a millimeter thick. Do I have 60 against that in the milk? And if I do, then the milk is okay. But if I don't, then he disagrees with Rabbeinu Tam, and the milk will be asur. Rabbeinu Tam says, I don't care about 60. It's always mutter. Because the klipa is irrelevant. Okay, so that's...
And if it turns out, like, it seems like if we end up assuming that we basically had equal amount from the top and the bottom, that if we didn't know that, and we had just a small amount of milk and a whole lot of basar, then it's not possible that the milk would not have absorbed the basar.
Okay, so Deborah is quoting to us the Aruch HaShulchan, which I sent you. Which... No, I wasn't necessarily about to read it, but that is right. That is there's a question here. There's some background questions. Let me...